Okay, guys, so I'm going to start the questions rolling pretty soon. But let's just have some house rules. I think let's maintain silence while the panel discussion is going on. At the end of the discussion, maybe about 30, 40 minutes, we will open the questions to the floor. There are already some members, thank you very much, who already have sent questions in advance. We will address those questions and also allow other people who have not sent questions to ask the questions. Okay, everyone is ready? Okay, so today we're going to talk about the changing role of the news editor. With the rise of digital and living in the age of pandemic, there are many new challenges of being a news editor today. And this is our inaugural hour-long Generations Talk Show. And we are speaking to the three veteran news editors that you see. And together, actually, they have a combined experience of over 40 years. And we want to talk about what's breaking news around the modern news desk today. So maybe the first question to our speakers, right? Can you tell us how your newsroom structure has adapted to the ever-changing safe distancing and hybrid work arrangements brought about by the pandemic regulations? Maybe start with Zakir.
Hi, Junli, and thanks for moderating this, and thanks everyone for joining us. I have to qualify. Most veterans in the audience, the pandemic and all, it's a range.
Zakir, I think you're lagging quite a bit. Yeah, can't really hear what you're saying.
Arrangements has two, yeah, for constant communication, not just with within the newsroom, but also what we need to cover and address in our sense of changing regulations and such. I think that to need mental
okay. Yeah. Zakir, sorry. We are really Zakir, can you hear me? You're really lagging quite a bit. We can't really hear what you are saying. Is there any way you can get a better connection?
Okay, let me try and log out of the.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So maybe let's okay.
Jean, why don't we go?
Yeah, maybe we go to
speakers first.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe Julie, would you like to talk about this first?
Yeah, so I think one of the benefits for Insider is that we have always been a digital newsroom. We've never, had another kind of product to put out, and so actually, our transformation during the pandemic has been fairly seamless. We actually grew, I want to say, by over 100 people on editorial over the course of the pandemic, and so perhaps like the biggest challenge has been onboarding new hires and making them feel comfortable and like they're part of the company culture and creating a company culture online. But we were actually able to go to a work from home model, in a pretty easy way.
Okay, I mean, when you guys started here, was it from the office at first, or did you start from the home immediately?
So we actually got to Singapore in December and really launched everything in January here. And so we had a few months of working from our office, which is a WeWork in the CBD, before we shut down in, I guess it was the end of April. And so, yeah, it's actually a little disconcerting because, we are such a small team here at the moment. We're growing, but I think that certainly the pandemic, one of the aspects that's made it difficult to start a new office is that it's harder to network with people because we haven't been able to do like regular networking events and regular, coffees or cocktail type things. It's been a lot harder. And so that definitely has been a challenge, but as of right now, we're all still working from home.
Okay. Maybe I go on to Shuyang. Shuyang, perhaps can tell us a bit about, like before the pandemic and after the pandemic, how has the way that the newsroom operates, right? And how has that changed? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chin Lee, and hello to everyone. I think Zakir has just demonstrated one of the challenges of working remotely to all of us. Like every day, I think the most frequent phrase that we use is, sorry, you are on mute, or your connection is not so good. Yeah, so these days I go back to the office only like once every week or every 2 weeks. And sometimes I look at the very empty newsroom and I myself am quite impressed that we still manage to churn out hundreds of stories every day without fail. It's been almost 2 years. And when it first started, the pandemic, when it first broke out, I remember it was very, very difficult, and especially for digital content, because digital content involves a bigger production team. You have to really talk with graphic designer, interactive designer, web designer, and then also video editor, videographer. And that was really difficult at the beginning. And sometimes we had to, instead of just rushing to the editing suite, we have to really screenshot and mark the time code and then send over and then try to explain over the phone. And that was really difficult. And I had like hundreds of screenshots on my phone at the beginning. Yeah, just to go through the idea about the edits. But I think these days we really got used to working remotely, and I myself, together with my team, I think we are starting to appreciate many of the good things that hybrid working arrangements can bring us. And I think Zakir is back, and I think we can hear more from him.
Okay, Zakir, you look like you're ready now. Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I hope you can hear me now.
Very loud and clear. Okay,
yeah. So I think this is key point is always have a backup plan. I'm dialing in through my iPad as well. Sometimes our VPN has issues. Yeah. I think just if I can summarize what I wanted to say earlier, I think the two things. I think the pandemic and especially COVID-19 showed the importance of constant communication and taking on board of feedback, and that includes from readers in shaping the kinds of stories we want to do, in responding to readers' concerns about some of the ever-changing issues, and then includes confusion over ever-changing regulations. Right? We're still trying to make sense of that as much as our readers are. So bear with us, because sometimes we don't. And if there's anything it showed us is that sometimes it's stuff we don't have the answers, but it's not just us. I think the people shaping policies don't always have the answers, and sometimes need to adjust and change course or flip-flop, whatever you might call it. It's a dynamic but also quite challenging situation. The second thing I think it's important, and I think some of other colleagues have noted, is I think the importance of mental health checks and wellness. And I think even more so, the newsroom can be a very high pressure environment, but especially with new hires having the challenge of not being physically in the newsroom ever. I think 20% of our colleagues now have never stepped into the newsroom for more than, a week or 2 weeks at a stretch, because they've joined since COVID-19. And I think the important thing that I've realized is it's fine. Never mind if you can't chase all the stories, do what you can as best as you can, and we'll try and find workarounds. Or I think mental health is, and I think mental well-being is key, more so than getting a scoop.
I mean, I heard from Julie and from Zakir, right, that one of the big issues is the onboarding of new colleagues. I have the same issue, right? And maybe you guys can talk a bit more about how do you resolve this? I mean, the point is new colleagues will have very little time, to bond with the team. And in the old days, myself having been through the Straits regime, there isn't really any system, right? You go in, you jump in, and you learn, and you know, when you get lost, you ask the guy next to you, hey bro, you know, can you help me? You know, what is all this? And that is always the culture of the newsroom. And now suddenly this whole way of working, you know, is different. I mean, for people that are established, like you know, your Chris Tan or Louis from Zaobao, who's been there for many years, that's easy, right? Because they're independent operators. But you know, can you talk a bit about the new hires that's coming in and how are you dealing with that bonding or put like kind of absorbing them into the system, you know?
If I could just jump in quickly, I mean, I'd say I think we've been even more focused. You know, so the moment joiners come on, we assign them a buddy, who, in addition to the supervisor, is someone they could be closer to, you know, who regularly works the same beats and can help guide them in terms of the challenges they face with filing stories, or what if the system crashes, what if the story crashes, you know. The other thing is, I think supervisors are also much more mindful to check in on them and to constantly, you know, check with them. And this includes, even though there's sort of safe distancing requirements, you know, you're not supposed to socialize outside of work. Forget it. I think you've got to throw some rules out the window. Basically, you know, get supervisors or buddies to meet those they work with regularly. And, you know, even if outside the work setting, just to kind of make sure they're, you know, they get the guidance and advice and help they need. Okay.
Julie, maybe not such a big issue for you because your newsroom is a bit smaller now, right? But as you're going to hire more people, right? I mean, how are you going to deal with this, the onboarding?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a challenge. I think we have a really, you know, structured onboarding that, you know, has come from our headquarters in New York, and it's the onboarding I went through. It's the onboarding that, you know, we've like cultivated over time. But I think as a newsroom grows, the needs of the onboarding system also grow. And so it's important, I think, that you make it as adaptable as possible to the situation. So yeah, we've definitely had to like constantly review and revise how we're onboarding people, what they need, take out the stuff that they don't need anymore. You know, obviously for one thing, you know, VPNs are much more important now than they ever were. So how to operate your VPN, like how to troubleshoot it when it's not working. And so I think it's really a microcosmic way of, or aspect of, you know, the level of flexibility you need to have in a situation like this, you know, where you really need to be able to every day walk in thinking like it's not going to be the way it was yesterday. And so how do we adapt and how do we grow while still, you know, maintaining like the values of the newsroom? And so yeah, I think that having a strong onboarding platform, having things like buddy systems in place, and then also like, you know, respecting people's time and respecting, you know, that a job is but one part of their lives, is really important, I think, as well, especially when people are working from home. There's a tendency to stay on the computer for more hours than you need to. And so I try and really instill the idea that like, no, this is a 9-to-5 job. We've created this office so that no one's working overtime in LA and no one's working overtime in the UK. And so this is meant, you know, to be a limited time, and we want you to have work-life balance.
Okay, you know, Zakir, I heard you say just now about mental health being very important, right? I know you said it several times, so it must be important. And I think the other panelists also might have some experience, you know. Can you talk about this mental health thing? I mean, you look at in the news, there are a lot of people outside the newsroom, right, who are having problems working alone, not being used to this situation. You know, are there interesting stories you can share without naming people, right? And what are the challenges you're facing and how you're dealing with those kind of things?
Just to share a very recent example, you know, a colleague's parent recently caught COVID, you know, and this was when the home recovery program was new and so on, and there was a bit of challenging confusion and so on. And we just told him, look, just drop everything, you know, we'll get your colleagues to cover. And to his credit, I think to their credit, many of us stepped in and helped, so that he was working, but he had the time off he needed to ensure that, the requirements were there, that, you're trying to contact the ministry for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. He had the time and space to do that. Unfortunately, he also came down with COVID. And so I think we've been constantly checking in on him and just, I think, giving, not just him, but colleagues who might find themselves in a similar situation because of family members on isolation notice and so on, making sure that they know who they've got colleagues who are willing to be there and just back them up. And we've been sending things like ordering food or making sure that they get the support they need.
Shuyang, do you have some experiences with colleagues maybe having some mental or anxiety issues because they are like kind of working at home,
Yeah, actually similar to Zakir's colleague, I also have an intern whose father got COVID. And I agree with Zakir that the constant checking in is really important. You can't really overestimate that the importance of constantly checking in. And I was very impressed that the interns these days, they are so young and yet they have such a strong sense of responsibility. I remember the intern was still like trying to file her story and then still trying to do everything else while being under home quarantine. I think as journalists, sometimes we think of ourselves as individual contributor and we work on our stories alone, do the research alone. But sometimes we are also really in need of a team and bounce our ideas off each other. And this is something that we kind of miss during this pandemic, or the informal brainstorming that can happen, not in a formal brainstorming session, but rather really on your way to the pantry or just, walking about the desks, etc., etc. And that's the thing that I'm kind of missing. And and sometimes the colleagues, they really open up to you and tell you that they feel this level of anxiety when they are working in their study in their home, because it feels like they are really fighting this war all by themselves. And all the supervisors are just sending in hangout messages and WhatsApps asking how's the story going. And that sometimes make the supervisors, I mean, at least when I heard about it, I was like, yeah, I really kind of need to reflect upon that, because sometimes working from home means that there's no visibility. So there's a tendency that the supervisors really want to know the progress of a certain story. And there's no proper debriefing process sometimes because of this remote working arrangement. But precisely because of that, we might need to be aware that the colleagues may be having a certain level of anxiety, and we are adding on to that mental stress unnecessarily sometimes.
Okay. So maybe let me jump to the next question, right? I mean, I've been Zooming a lot these days, and so has everyone. Let me ask, you guys are senior news editors. Has Zoom become the preferred mode for press conferences now? Or, is there still a place for physical news events? Important question for me because I'm still doing PR, right? Maybe
if I can just...
Zakir, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it is. I think Zoom's become the preferred mode of news conferences, for news events and so on. And I think it's going to be very hard for PR agencies to go back on this, because I think all the more journalists realize, look, I don't need to take up time traveling or moving around. On one level, it makes it easier for journalists to then dial into an event, to cover it virtually. But on the other hand, I think something's lost, and in the sense when you attend a press conference, it's not just about the press conference or the news event. It's about the people you contact on the side. It's about the other journalists you meet and interact with. It's about the conversations that happen before and after the event. And I think we all do hope that, and especially for very young journalists starting out in the business, these events are critical. I mean, it's key to just going down and being there. Nothing beats that. All that you don't have during a Zoom conference. Yeah.
Julie, what are your thoughts? I mean, if it's something that can be said over Zoom, right? I mean, if you're launching a new product, for example, a new car, perhaps there's a need for physical presence, right? But if you're dealing with news and it's about Q&A, what are your thoughts? Should Zoom just be the way forward? I mean, even after the COVID, let's say.
I actually think that, Zoom does offer a level of convenience. Like I'm a person who literally doesn't ever take a lunch break because I'm always just in front of the computer. So it's, for me, the less time I have to spend in transit for anything, the happier I am. But I would say that there is like something that's really important. One, out of getting in front of people directly, and two, I think that an in-person event can offer, but also two, I think that there's a level of journalistic experience that some journalists are missing because they don't go out and actually report on things as they're happening or in person. And so there is a level of skill that's being lost. And I regularly, at this point, it's like hard enough to get people to get on the phone versus just emailing. I think the preference is always like especially amongst like Gen Z millennials, like the preference is to like have whatever the contact is to be like the least amount of contact as possible in order to get the answer. And, so I do think that there is a real value in throwing somebody into the deep end and making them actually go out to a real event and report on it. So I hope that they don't fully go away.
Okay. Shuyang, what are your thoughts? Yeah. Shuyang, is there something you want to add maybe to that experience or?
I think previously pre-pandemic, when we look at the news planner, we see all the locations all over the country, like journalists are going everywhere. And that was when I appreciated the fact that the SPH News Center was right at the middle of the Singapore map, and you have like almost equal distance from the east or from the west. But then these days, when I look at the news planner, under the location box it just says Zoom or virtual or webinar. Yeah, but then it doesn't seem to affect the quality of the reporting. But then you never know what you miss, because when we were trained as a rookie journalist, I remember being told going to an event as early as possible and then leave as late as possible, because you never know what will happen before it formally starts and formally ends. And these days, you go to the webinar, it started by the host, ended by the host, and there's nothing intangible or extra that you can get out of an event. So that's the part that I think kind of affects the journalistic quality.
Yeah. So maybe let me give some input. This is very interesting because when I used to be a rookie reporter, and my first boss was Tan Hao, right? And he always sent me for events, and I'll call back and I'll say, Tan Hao, there's no news here. This is all boring stuff. And he would say, Jinli, don't come back until you've got the news, right? So you're at the event and you're desperately looking for an alternative. And with the Zoom situation, you can't do that, right? The other thing was, like Shuyang, what you said, right? Like the speech may have ended, but if there is a reporter there asking questions with the government person, you better hang on there, right? Because they might say something and you don't have it. And it did happen to me once, actually, when I was a young reporter. The meeting was over and I got off, and then the Zaobao reporter stayed on, and the next day they had a story that I didn't. And of course, Dominic Naden, if you remember him, he was my news editor then, he gave me a difficult but kind time. Okay, I want to move into something a bit more interesting, right? And I want to move about the shift to digital, right? Zakir and Shuyang, both of you sort of like me as print journalists. Julie, you are a true digital native, right? I think one of the biggest challenges in the digital newsroom, right, or in hybrid newsroom, is about balancing speed and accuracy, right? In the old days, as a print journalist, I had time to go and come up with the best story, get the best angle, get 3 quotes, get their age, get everything, and then as long as they meet off stone, we are good, right? Similar with broadcast. But today, I think time is a luxury, and if you're not the first to get the news online, you're going to lose the eyeballs. I think speed thrills, right? But you also can kill accuracy, unfortunately. So maybe tell the audience, how are your newsrooms dealing with this conundrum, trying to balance between speed and accuracy? Maybe Zakir, let's start with you.
I think we're quite clear on the principle that accuracy is first. accuracy and verification. And I think we're quite willing to lose the edge on speed to the competitors out there. But at the same time, I think speed is also important. So it's tough to stress on that. And sometimes, I mean, in the rush to speed things up, we do get things wrong and so on. And the good thing about, I guess, the digital realm is you can correct something quite fast. But even then, every correction is one more unnecessary correction. So we do try and avoid those situations, I'd say. Yeah.
But even though in the online world you can just make corrections quickly, there's also a rule that you don't always remove what you took away, right?
Correct. Yes.
And what happens if
there
there
are too many notes?
Yeah. What happens if there's too many corrections? Then how do you deal with that? Yeah.
So we try and avoid those situations, but unfortunately, when there are, maybe we do take down a story, and sometimes we do have a major clarification.
Okay. So what I hear from you is you must get it right. The principles of the newsroom, which is accuracy, is still paramount, right?
Yep.
But doesn't mean that speed is not important. You also got to work fast, right?
Yeah.
Julie, what are your thoughts? Share with us. Yeah.
So as you mentioned, I've always been on the digital side. I haven't always been in news, and so this actually, like, the speed aspect for me is fairly new in that I was on lifestyle for many years, and so it wasn't as necessary to get something up immediately. We actually, we definitely are always thinking about. We have a policy: we never take anything down. But we will always update stuff. And so, if there's new developments in a story, we're going to update it. One of the newer developments that our team has done to deal with sort of the need for speed is we actually have within the news team a separate speed desk. And the speed desk is actually just literally like news breaks. They get up 100 words on it, the story goes out, and then they backfill it after it's live. And so, because I think that our team thinks a lot about not just getting the news out, but like, what is the SEO value of getting the story first or second? And sometimes there is no real value to writing something if you can't get it up within the first 30 minutes of the thing happening, because you've already lost your advantage. And as a, we like to say, like, we're not the paper of record. We can make choices about what we cover and what we don't cover. And so this is a big part of, how we think about things is like, where can we win? And how can we utilize the speed of our digital native writers, while still also providing this other series of benefits by having more in-depth reporting, or having features, or having incremental pieces or analysis of what's happening. So they kind of exist side by side at our company.
Okay. Shuyang, what about yourself?
I think everyone believes that accuracy is definitely more important than speed. But the problem is, whenever we push out that story, we believe is accurate, and then later on it turns out it may not be. That's the scary part of it. There's this Chinese term called 内卷, which means involution, or a fierce and sometimes unnecessary competition. So it's brought about by the 966 culture in mainland China. So these days, whenever I do the multi-ministry task force news conference, I'm reminded of this term involution 内卷, because I feel that everyone is rushing to push out these infographics that show you all the new announcements of the safe distancing measures, new community measures, all within minutes after the embargo is lifted. And every single minute that you are late than the other media outlets, it will definitely affect your number of shares on the social media, and then things like that. So these days, it's still a struggle to balance this accuracy and speed. But we are trying.
Zakir, I'm going to pose another question back to you. you know, I remember there was a time where there was a breaking news team, and then there was the normal beat reporters, and then sometimes it's kind of combined, and then it's back again. I mean, what is the current situation, and what are your thoughts around that? You know, do you have a separate breaking news team? Do you use the same reporters for everything? Where are we at now?
So we've kind of evolved into a hybrid system where we no longer have we have a small pool of breaking news reporters so that everyone starting out for the first 6 months to a year does breaking news. But they do what we call sort of commodity breaking news, you know, a lot of the straightforward ones. But the mantra is breaking news is everyone's responsibility. So if there's a major transport accident and development, Tristan will come in and file it fast, you know. If there's a major health breaking news development, Salma, Lynette will come in and file it fast as well. So that's the arrangement. We do rotate so that the different editors on breaking news duty each day, and their task is to really trawl and monitor what the competition is saying and what the news breaks that we need to stay on top of are. But we're really moving towards an integrated system where everything is digital first. And we, I think in the next few months, we're still in the middle of it. We're actually moving away from a print team entirely. So everything should be online first, except for maybe our exclusives or features. And what the small print team does is what is done in many other papers abroad. They curate it for the print product.
Okay. Let me move on to the next question, right? I mean, also related with the move to digital. I mean, I think this may be for Zakir and Shuyang, right? Because your newsroom started off print and then now it's digital. So, you know, what are the challenges, the other than speed and accuracy, right? What are the other challenges that you're facing now operating a digital newsroom or even a hybrid newsroom, you know, and what are the pros and cons, you know, of this situation?
I'll just go first. I think digital transformation happens really in stages, especially for the newsroom. I think at the very beginning, it was really a simple change of platform. So you have the same story, but then now you are publishing it online first. But then later on, as we discovered more and more tools, digital tools, then we got to know like videos, podcast, social embed, interactive infographics, all sorts of things. So I think as we kind of move along the transformation curve, I think the challenge right now, instead of encouraging more and more print journalists to try different tools, is the challenge now is rather to encourage people to be more selective, because now we know so many different tools, but not necessarily, they don't necessarily fit the purpose of each stories. So instead of thinking of doing everything, trying all sorts of formats, we just have to be really selective. So that's what I think is the challenge right now. And instead of really forcing everyone to do digital stuff, maybe we have to really identify who are the people who are really, really good with what they do with the digital tools, and who are the people who can really just focus on doing a good story, whether in print or online or any format.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when I had to do TV when it was media work, so it was quite bad for me. Yeah. So I think I want to end the discussion here, you know, and actually go to Q&A, because I think we've got a lot of friends and other members who probably have a lot of burning questions. Okay, I'm going to start with some of the questions that were sent to us beforehand. The first one is from Eugene, who is with Rise Communications. His question: there are new challenges in being a news editor today, especially in the digital space. But what does that mean for the print media landscape? And if there is a large focus on digital news, how do we ensure that news on print won't be obsolete by then?
Okay, let me try that. That's a very tough one. I mean, we recently put out a survey, I think about a month or so ago. You know, 70% plus of our readers now read it online or an e-paper in some format. But that doesn't do away with the need for print, because that's still nearly 100,000 readers actually looking at the print products or the e-paper, which is practically print. I think people, I think there will still be people, and there are people who only want to read the news once a day, you know, either in the morning or when they have a break at lunch or when convenient, and they want to read it at one go in a 15 or 20-minute break, right? And I think there's value in that. So I think as long as that demand is there, the print products will remain and command a premium. The challenge is how to make sure we do that while not duplicating resources, you know, or stretching digital teams. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to figure out still. There's still beauty in print graphics, and that's why sometimes some of our artists do spend a huge amount of time just focusing on a beautiful print product.
Okay.
I would say too, you know, I think that there's got to be I think that there is, I think in the PR universe, print is still like heavily valued over online in a lot of cases. Like the idea of getting print placement of a product in a magazine or, you know, newspaper is still very valued within the PR universe in my experience. And so I think that that's going to keep print alive for a while as well, because of, you know, the ad dollars that are going to come in from having a, you know, full page ad in the New York Times versus a banner or like programmatic advertising on someone's website.
Yeah. My clients are always very excited when their CEOs appear in print. And then they will buy the SPH plug that costs $500. You get the plug and you get reproduction rights, and they're extremely happy. Works for me. Shuyang, maybe you can talk a bit about, I mean, you're with the digital team, right? On that note, right? I mean, are you creating, you know, do you expect your reporters will do everything, right? Or do you segregate them? Like if you're doing videos, just do videos. If you're doing articles, breaking news, you're doing articles. How do you do that? Or do you expect all your reporters will do like video and online? You know?
Yeah, I think it's a bit different for the Chinese media group. So how we do it here is that I have a small team, and these people focus on the video production and then the web articles, infographics and interactives and visual data visualization. And then I also work with all the other desks with their journalists and see how we can package it digitally. So I have kind of two sets of scopes. But within my team, yes, some of them have specialization in video production. Some of them are better in data visualization kind of thing. Yeah. But then in terms of the print journalists, or rather, I mean, there's no print journalists these days. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of all the other news desks, all the other desks, then each of them has their fortes, and we need to kind of tailor make as well. But as Zakir shared, some of them are just really experts in their fields. So whatever format you are turning their stories into, they are the brains behind that story. Yeah, and that won't change.
Okay. So is the Zaobao TikTok account under your care too?
Oh, unfortunately, no, I'm not having that fun. I'm missing out, having some FOMO these days. Yeah, but that's under our social media platform. There's another social media team who's managing that, and they are much younger than me, and they really know how to do it.
I was quite amazed to see some of the content. I'm very impressed.
Okay.
Let's move on. So part one, Singh from Republic Polytechnic, he's got this question. Should legislation be altered to allow greater diversity in Singapore media? This is a tough question. Anyone want to try?
Actually, I get, okay, let me, I think I get the point of where the question is coming from. But I don't know, I mean, increasingly, as we've seen, you know, the NPPA is a lot of alternative media has flourished in the online space. It's not, and it's not just mainstream media. I mean, I've got colleagues who feel, you know, why is government giving interviews to Mothership and Mashare News and the likes of, you know, Plan B and all these other new outlets that have popped up. Rice Media, for instance. I mean, personally, I'm quite glad that there's this diversity out there, because it lets viewers and readers see what they can be. But I think it also kind of puts the, pushes mainstream media and especially traditional, if you can ever call it that, journalists to try and work harder and stay relevant. I mean, not everyone wants to report a story Mothership or Masha News is on, and even between them there are differences and so on. So I think there's enough room for diversity, and there's enough diversity in Singapore media. I think if you're suggesting that there should be maybe 5 different print newspapers, I think that's a little of a crazy idea, because you then just drive everyone to the lowest common denominator. And I think we're past that stage, I'd say.
Okay. Now I'm going to jump because we are running a bit of time, out of time, right? So next question from Eileen Che, Director Outreach from Singapore Red Cross. What advice would you give PR practitioners about news dissemination, media engagement for positive coverage or to manage crisis comms in the context of the new normal? Okay, I guess they're asking for PR advice.
If I can jump in quickly as well for this one, I'd say I think the way to go is to constantly engage or build relationships with journalists or media editors, because sometimes the best way to get when to time a story, is to I think engage and give journalists exclusives or stories that they know readers might want to read and help shape that. I don't have specific examples, but I think, constant engagement is key, I'd say.
Okay.
I actually want to butt in here and just say I fully disagree with constant engagement. I think that my feeling is you should always come at a a journalist with a peg, with an angle.
Mm-hmm.
Say, tell me how what you're doing fits into what's happening in the world at large. I think a lot of times, I am looking for things to write about. I want to write about stuff, but I need to have a reason to write about it. So be a reason why you need to write about it. And I for one really appreciate what PR professionals do, and I always say I could never do that work, because I just feel like you have to deal with a large amount of people ignoring your emails or whatever. So I think that being really intentional to me is very important in a PR practice.
Okay. My advice for Eileen, you can look for a good PR agency. Good PR agency will understand the different likes and dislikes of the different journalists that you can pitch to. Moving on. I'm going to steal a few questions because we're running out of time. So I'd like to take this question from Bo Tiong, right? Bo Tiong is the chairman of Mileage Communications. I've known him for a long time, right? Since I was a journalist. So he's got a question. Most articles in the media are based on surveys or reports by government agencies, organizations, and companies. And journalists add value by calling a few experts or stakeholders for their comments. This is armchair reporting. Nothing wrong there, but what readers want are more original stories based on developing or evolving economic or social, environmental, political situations. May I suggest some examples, right? What is the impact of the prolonged political crisis in Myanmar on Singapore companies and other hotel operating there? What are the top local event companies coping with the fallout from the pandemic? There are 78 companies suspended by SGX, some for a few years. How can the situation be resolved? So I think Bo Tiong has some ideas, right? What do you guys think?
I don't really think there was a question in there. I mean, I agree though that I think that it's really in this frame that we work in that is very speed oriented. I think that there is sort of a formula that a lot of times is used by news outlets to get information out quick and fast. And I believe that what people really want is to feel a personal connection to a story. And so I always coach my team to think about what is the personal angle, what are the stakes in a story. And for instance, one of the recent stories we did was on Evergrande, and how Evergrande is a massive story, and it's a massive issue, and a massive has a lot of potential consequences. But I think in all of the stories that you read about Evergrande, you don't really get to see like how it affects the actual person on the ground. And so we did a story about how millennials in China are actually changing how they feel about buying a house, and they're rethinking whether they even want to like put money into real estate at this point. So we talked to 5 different, people who were reconsidering home purchasing. And so that's, I think, a way to kind of break up the monotony of the formulaic news story, is to think about like, okay, who's really affected by this and why should people care?
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to thank Bo Tiong actually for those suggestions. We have been working on some of them. They've been very tough to crack. Just to give the example of the Singapore companies in Myanmar, I think we've kind of done hit and run reporting on some of them, but many of them, Park Hotel, for instance, still has a presence there. And so many of them are actually doing okay with the crisis. I mean, yeah, maybe many of them service the generals and just, but they are trying to resolve some of the issues behind the scenes. I think it's challenging for them. But yeah, we'll try and crack it. I think part of the other issue is the challenge of just reporting from Myanmar.
Yeah, sounds exciting and dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know I rushed through this a bit because we still have 7 minutes, and I would like to open it to the floor. How can we do this, Janet? Do they raise their hands or okay? Either you raise your hands and you do that from reactions, or you can just type your question in the chat box.
Yeah, I suggest that attendees just unmute yourself and ask the question. That will speed up the whole.
Okay, that works too. Yeah.
Perhaps I start with a question addressed to Shuyang. When you're reporting for the Chinese media versus the English medium, is there any difference in terms of the angle and the way you will treat stories? Because it's a different set of.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think for commodity news or news that English media outlets also cover, there's no specific difference that we are reporting. But in terms of video production and other video content, we try to focus more on subject matters that really relate with the Chinese community, whether it's culture or some point of view or heritage and things like that. And when we are looking for profiles, it will be preferred if they can speak in Mandarin, but that's not the number one criterion, because ultimately it's still the story that matters. So sometimes the journalists also ask, oh, do the interviewees have to speak in Mandarin? Otherwise we choose someone else? That's a very common question. But then actually the answer is, it depends on their story. If the story is good, we can always do subtitling and things like that. But then if the story isn't good, however fluent you are in Mandarin, it doesn't help. Yeah, so that's one thing. But in terms of the subject matters, we try to see whether there's more relevance to the Chinese community. For example, during the recent racial or the discussion over racial issues, we did a lot of coverage, and the angle that we put the stories out specifically to voice out some of the different ideas that the Chinese community has over racial issues, rather than echoing other aspects of the society.
Okay, thank you.
If I can add very quickly, I think Singapore's environment is still a very multilingual one. Just as an example, I think the recent survey set of stories we did on seniors and why they weren't getting vaccinated, close to 70% of the interviews were actually done in Mandarin or dialects.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually always very impressed with the Zaobao reporters, because my Chinese is bad. And they will come up my interviews and you can totally speak to them in English. The only thing is you got to make sure the client has a Chinese translation of his name if he's Indian or European, right? And the Zaobao reporters will take care of the rest, right? They interview in English, they ask questions and they write in Chinese. I think kudos, right? I think it's really difficult.
Yeah. And thanks for all the people who really appreciate how we break any breaking news even faster than English papers, because we still had to take one more step of translating all of them, and yet we beat them. Talking about speed and accuracy.
Okay. Any other questions, please, from the floor? Peter, yes. Peter, please. I see Peter raising his hand. Peter, you need to unmute your mic. We can't hear you, Peter. Okay. Yes, Peter, please go ahead.
I think he just logged off.
Oh dear. Did I scare him? Something can't be. It's Peter Lim.
I see him on, but yeah.
Yeah, I think he may have accidentally logged off lah. Okay. We wait a few minutes for him. Okay. Yeah. Anyone from the floor? Any other questions? Peter is logged off, right? I don't see him now. Oh yeah, Peter is there. Peter, maybe just type your question in the chat box, and I'll read out the question. Okay, maybe while Peter is typing, let's go to Aziz's question that he has sent earlier. Question from Aziz: how far would journalists in Singapore be willing to push the boundaries, bearing in mind what we know now, what Reza did in Philippines, to enable her to win the Nobel Peace Prize?
Let me try and answer that. I mean, I think we do push, try and push the boundaries all the time. But I think Maria Ressa was operating in a very different context, and I think you know, there's a lot behind the scenes, and I think even practically every other week we get a litany of complaints, grumblings from, you know, government officials who are not happy with how we cover certain interests, certain issues, and how we, you know, how we report on things. So I think it's an evolving dynamic, but I don't think, if anything, I think you know, we've been a bit bolder in covering issues than we were previously, I'd say.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, Zakir, because I was very impressed with the piece on judicial review, where
yes,
yeah, that I thought I was surprised to see that, right? And there was the piece commenting about the FICA and the topic of judicial review, and your reporters actually interviewed my ex-lecturer, Kevin Tan, right, and some lawyers who said certain things that I was actually happy, but a bit surprised that, you know, you were bold enough to actually put it on print, right? I'm not sure whether 10 years ago that would have been possible, to be very honest, right? But I think that's great.
I mean, even issues like Teo Yo Yan and Kok Ho, the two researchers who say, you know, people need more than 6,000 for a family of 4 to live on. I mean, there's a lot of unhappiness over that, but you know, it's our duty to kind of report what's out there and report the evolving debate on things.
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter is on.
Peter, are you on now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Peter, loud and clear.
Okay, I just want to make an observation. Usually people say, the old people say, wow, you guys are having so easy, time is very tough. Your world now is so much more complex than during my time, right? But I just want to say this. You got to get your news fast, get news accurate, but don't forget there's a big value in long form journalism. So, and this is very tough for the news editors. So you may have to then, you know, have news editors who just concentrate on long form journalism, the others on the fast breaking news and the short stories. And you've got to explain things to people. And this question about, is it better now than before? In terms of freedom of expression, it's much better now than before. And don't let go of that. Keep pushing the boundaries. Government's on the defensive in some respects. But don't overdo it, because they can also overreact. But keep pushing it. Yeah.
I think, Zakir, an example in the arts where the Straits Times kept pushing it was with the closing down of the substation. There was an awful lot in the media of diverse views from the National Arts Council. There was a lot of former ambassadors at large too. There was a lot of voices. And I think that the reporting on that, given the importance in the community of that particular arts centre, the substation, was very well done. It wasn't an easy one to navigate.
Thanks, Sally. I have to add, though, I think sometimes the perception arises that we're not pushing enough is because expectations have also risen quite a bit. And I think with, the plethora of media sites, even on issues like Yale and US, we do try, and even as we push and explore different avenues, kind of try and reflect all sides and be balanced. But for those affected, they feel, nothing can ever be enough.
See, the value is not in pushing. The value is in explaining things in perspective. And that's the best form of journalism. Explain it truthfully.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Peter, thanks very much for your input. For those who don't know, Peter was the leader of the Straits Times for many, many years before I joined.
Honestly, I learned a lot today, okay? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're going to end it here. But before I go, thank you very much, for the panel and speakers for taking time off to join us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and being part of this. Without the audience, the newspaper is nothing, right? Without the audience, the generations talk means nothing. It's just me talking to 3 other people. So thanks very much, and please join us for the subsequent events. Janet, I'm not sure how you share the timetable, but I know the plan is we're trying to do a generations talk once every 2 months. Okay, and I guess you'll see more of me, and I hope to bring in other views, other experts, and to keep this thing going for a very long time for everyone. So thanks again, everyone. Bye-bye.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
Yes, Peter.
In my time, long ago, I used to ask our reporters, hey, how come we are so slow when the Chinese newspapers have to translate and yet beat us to? Happened in the old days too. And my colleagues were not very happy with me saying that. Well done.
Thanks, Peter, for the comments. Now I'm feeling very stressed and I need to tend to my mental health. Need to keep up the standard.
Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, guys, for participating. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Panelists, please stay.